Hello, and thank you so much for clicking on the Relief Mental Health YouTube page. Really appreciate you being here. Today, you've selected to learn a little bit more about change and how we can make lasting change, right? Change is a constant and necessary part of our lives, impacting our personal, professional, and social realms. However, navigating change and making it sustainable can be challenging. The journey to embrace and sustain change can feel daunting oftentimes. So, this presentation aims to demystify the process of change by exploring its nature, understanding the different types of change that we encounter, and highlighting its importance for overall well-being. Through a detailed exploration of the stages of change model, you will gain insights into the various phases of change, from pre-contemplation to maintenance and so on, and learn effective strategies to navigate each stage successfully. My name is Cangialosi, and I am one of the therapists and the clinical development coordinator at Relief Mental Health. I have over a decade of therapeutic experience in various capacities, and with that, I have worked with an innumerable amount of folks who have come to me seeking change for their own lives. I have a lot of experience assisting others with identifying the turmoil and distress that contributes to feelings of anxiety, depression, and more. Once we are able to identify specific changes needed to relieve that distress, we are able to move toward relief that is lasting. Right? So welcome to creating change that will have lasting impacts in all areas of life. So now that I've introduced myself and given some brief background on my own experience, I do want to quickly share a little bit about who we are at Relief Mental Health. Relief is an outpatient provider of transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, which is FDA approved to treat depression, OCD, anxious depression, and smoking addiction. At Relief, we also offer the nasal spray Spravato S-ketamine for treatment-resistant depression or major depression with suicidal thoughts. We are approved in a few of our locations to administer IV ketamine. And then, of course, you can access your standard medication management and psychotherapy with us as well. So, in addition to understanding the mechanics and importance of change, this presentation is going to address the psychological and emotional barriers that often hinder progress, such as the fear of failure, the fear of unknown, and even the fear of success. By examining common fears and providing practical strategies to overcome them, my hope is that you will feel equipped to build resilience and set realistic goals and develop a growth mindset around change. I'm going to offer practical tools and techniques for creating lasting change, including goal setting, habit formation, mindfulness practices, and the importance of social support systems. Right? Now, through hands-on practice and some tangible tools that you can take, you will leave this video with a personalized action plan and, hopefully, the confidence to implement and sustain meaningful changes in your lives. So most of us have a basic understanding of change, what it means, what it is, etc. But we rarely go further than our understanding of change being, a transitioning from one state of being to another. When in actuality, there are different types of change. So I'll go over these with you here really quick. So we have what's considered happened change. And this is the kind of change that occurs when something, you guessed it, happens to you. It's the result of an event that is outside of your control, and usually it's unpredictable. A happened change can include a traumatic event, but it doesn't necessarily have to. Okay. So an example of this would be sustaining an injury while exercising, right? This is a change that has happened to the physical well-being. Okay, I hurt myself. We have also what's called reactive change. Now that's a change that takes place in response to an event. So an example of that would be having to change the workout routine because of the injury. We would have what's considered anticipatory changes. Now, these are changes that happen because we're able to see a potential event on the horizon. So an example of that would be if I were making a change in my spending habits because I know that in the future I'd like to move, maybe move out of state from one area to another. So I would need to save up money to do that. So that's an anticipatory change. We have also planned changes. Now, these are the types of changes that we make in order to see improvements in our lives. Okay, so kind of piggybacking on that last example, I would be planning to move out of state in order to improve my overall quality of life. Maybe I want to leave the Midwest and go to Arizona because I'd like to get out of the winters, right? And then finally, we have what's called incremental changes. And these are the types of changes that we make over time. Okay. Now, it can be argued that incremental changes are part of planned changes, right? In other words, we make smaller changes in order to achieve a bigger planned change that we're striving for, right? So that would be accurate. An example of an incremental change would be a change in my behavior. I'm going from, my usual relaxing on the couch each night after work to now I'm actually spending some time in my evenings searching for a job in the state that I'd like to move to, right? Let me look for those jobs. Okay. So today in this presentation, we are going to be focusing mostly on planned and incremental types of change. Okay. So now we have a further understanding of change, what it is and why it might be difficult sometimes. So let's take a look at how we can begin to implement change. And to do this, we first need to examine the 5 areas of life as a tool to identify what needs to change. Okay, now for some, this might be pretty obvious. I want to stop feeling so depressed, or I want to like my job, my professional life, right? But less obvious than that is the answer to this question: why are you feeling distressed? Or how is life really going, right? So let's understand those 5 areas of life so that we can effectively take stock, okay? So first we have what I describe as our professional life. Now this is going to include how you feel about your job. Do you enjoy your vocation? Does it provide for you the way you would like for it to, or the way that you need? Do you feel satisfied and secure? Okay. We have home life. Home life includes what your physical home feels like for you. So are you comfortable? Do you have the creature comforts that you enjoy? A nice comfortable couch, a place for you where you can relax. Are your needs being met? Now, if you live with a partner, your home life will include how you feel your relationship is going, okay? So the status of your relationship falls under home life if you're living together. Then we have social life, right? So this is how you're doing socially. Are you engaging enough with other people? Or are you kind of isolating more? Are you participating in hobbies? Or here, if you do have a partner, but you don't live together, then the level of your relationship status would fall here within the social category. Okay, so how are those pieces going for you? Physical area of your life. Now, this is how you are feeling physically. Okay, are you mostly healthy, getting those good checkups? Or do you tend to be sickly? Or you find yourself kind of getting injured or having some aches and pains more often, right? What is your relationship with your physical body like? How do you like to present? Okay, so those are some aspects to be looking at with our physical area of life. Okay, and then finally we do have spiritual life. And yes, this area does apply to everyone, even for those who don't identify with any specific type of religion, belief, or spiritual practice, because the real question here is, how do you feel about what you do and do not believe? Have you come to some strong conclusions? Are you solid in those beliefs? Or are you still questioning or exploring some things? Either way is okay, but that's why we include spiritual life, because it does apply to everybody. If you are strong in your convictions of, what you believe, that's it. Okay? All right, so now we've gone over each category of the 5 areas of life. So now you can ask yourself, well, how are you doing? And questions like this are not meant to discourage. They're not meant to be used as judgments. These questions are an integral part of the process of creating change. Because as I said before, it is necessary for us to know what our starting point is. All right. So this slide here shows 5 blank boxes representing each area of life. Okay. So now you can use this template to create your own notes to indicate what, if anything, you would like to see different in any of these areas for your life. Okay. So here I'm going to invite you to take a few minutes, grab some paper. You're going to probably want a couple of pieces. Grab some paper. And I'm going to ask that you write these 5 areas as shown here on this slide. Make your own boxes. And for each, write down some things that you would like to see different for you, for your own life. So for example, you may write that you would like to get a new job that does provide you a more substantial salary. That's fair. Put that on the professional box. Or you may write that you would like to improve upon your social life, maybe taking a hobby. Okay, write that down on the social box. Now, don't worry if it feels too big, because we are going to learn how to make these more manageable. Okay, so go ahead, pause this video, take a few minutes to do that now. All right, welcome back. So when any one or more of the 5 areas of life are off or really not working for you, I will call that turmoil and distress. Okay, turmoil being defined as a state of great disturbance, confusion, or uncertainty, and distress being defined as extreme anxiety, sorrow, or pain. Right? And if you really think about it, mental health conditions and concerns really could all be defined as, well, both turmoil and distress. And this is the reason why change is needed. Feeling any amount of turmoil or distress is really your signal that some kind of change is required. Following long durations of distress and turmoil, we risk experiencing quite a number of issues that include, but aren't really limited to, the things you see here on your screen. Physically, we might notice some feelings of lethargy, right? Tired all the time. We might experience headaches, maybe some digestive issues, some chronic pain flare-ups, and even some long-term health concerns. Mentally speaking, we might notice some brain fog, forgetfulness, a lack in judgment, or some reduced focus. Emotionally speaking, we'll find ourselves having more difficulty regulating, so we experience some emotional dysregulation, feelings of hopelessness, maybe some intolerance to what are your standard day-to-day annoyances, but we can't really tolerate them as much anymore. And then, of course, anxiety and depression fall in this box as well. And then finally, relationally, we might notice that we're having more frequent arguments, or we notice that we're feeling more distant from our loved ones. This leads us to a lack of connection and ultimately some feelings of isolation. So why change, right? Now that previous slide painted a clear picture of what we can find ourselves up against when we allow turmoil and distress to go on. So here, we're going to take a look at what we stand to gain if we allow proper change to happen. So why do that? Well, for one, we stand to gain personal growth. Every change that occurs in our life will teach us something, whether good, bad, or indifferent. There is always something to be learned from changes that occur. Flexibility, right? With adaptability comes this lowered sense of anxiety and a heightened sense of self-esteem, and this is what allows for that increased flexibility. We stand to gain improvements in our lives, right? It's impossible to improve without change. If I wanted to be more physically healthy, I would have to be willing to make some changes in some of my lifestyle habits. We develop resilience. Now, resilience is a form of personal growth. It is one of many lessons that change will teach us. When we experience happened change, as I mentioned before, resilience really is the result of that. Having the ability to bounce back after life throws us a curveball is an invaluable skill. Okay, so more on resilience later, I promise. We also gain motivation. Changes create movement through motivation. Now, I often tell my clients that motivation will never come, so stop waiting for it, right? Motivation only comes when those first steps are taken and we can begin to see the positive effects of those steps. So this is what creates movement and momentum for us to continue doing the good work that leads to success in creating lasting change. We also stand to gain confidence. Because let's face it, for most people, change really is scary. And when we face the fear that change can bring, we are actually behaving bravely. Bravery equals confidence, right? The more we step outside of our comfort zone, the more confidence we gain. And then we also stand to improve our relationships. All of the above on this slide translates into a greater ease with which to be in relationship with us. Others will find us easier to be with, easier to communicate with, easier to have fun with, and that list can go on and on. So let's jump into some ways to create change by first discussing the stages of change. Okay, now this was developed by Prochaska and Di Clemente, and there are 6 stages of change. Okay, so first we have the pre-contemplation stage, and now this is before we even begin to consider a change. At this point, the behaviors or the lifestyle doesn't really seem to be a problem at all. Okay, we might be unaware of how our behaviors or choices are impacting a specific area of life. So for example, one might be unaware of how disliking their job is impacting their relationship with their partner. Therefore, what change is really needed? Okay. Additionally, pre-contemplation includes folks who may be aware of these impacts, but they feel as though they are completely powerless to change anything. Therefore, they're not even contemplating change because, like, what would that be, right? Next, we have contemplation. And so now in contemplation, we are aware. Okay, so at this point, we might now be, partner is now expressing their concern about the job. So we begin to consider making a change, whether or not we really know what that change might be yet. Okay, we understand the impact of our behaviors and choices have on the world around us and our own quality of life. See, we understand that at this point. Okay, so now we're beginning to think about maybe I should make a change. After contemplation comes the preparation stage. Here is where the planning begins. Okay, now incidentally, even in the preparation stage, we begin to make small action steps toward change. Spoiler alert, action is next. Right? And so this is where the individual might dig out their resume in order to begin sprucing it up. This person may decide to take some vocational quizzes to engage in some self-discovery, or maybe even they speak to their therapist or seek out a therapist in order to kind of do some of this self-exploration. Okay? Now, see how I can say that? These here are action steps and preparation steps. Okay. Then we have our, you guessed it, action phase. And action is action. This is where the actual doing of things is happening. The resume is being submitted, the applications are being sent, the outreaches are being made, the networking groups are being attended. Okay, so that's where we're actually hitting the ground running. After action, we have maintenance. Here's where we need to keep it up. Change, and especially lasting change, isn't going to come about overnight. Now I'm going to touch a little bit more on habit forming later in this presentation, but in the maintenance stage of change is where consistency is key, right? Keep it up, because even though you can't see it right in front of you, you really truly are building that determination. Okay, and then finally we do have a relapse stage. Right? Now, relapse is when you do fall back into those old ways. Maybe you've allowed more than a week or so to go by without submitting a job application. Right? Most people will view relapse as a failure and unfortunately will give up. Well, I didn't succeed, so I must not be meant to get that new job. However, a relapse occurring while trying to make a change is actually part of the process. So it's important to realize that you are not broken if this happens to you. Here, you just have to ask yourself, what am I willing to do with this setback? Okay, so when this happens, you'll want to circle back to the preparation or the action stage of change. Okay, kind of reset yourself. Seeking out support is also another key tactic, and I'm going to discuss that again later on in the presentation as well. So you'll see how seeking support really can help us through a relapse phase. So I would say that pretty close to 100% of people have some level of fear of change, or at least some level of discomfort with change. Adjusting to anything, even good things, is hard. So I do want to take a moment here to identify and acknowledge some of the more common cognitive distortions that come up for most folks so that we might be able to address them. Now, fear of change boils down to three main categories: fear of the unknown, fear of failure, and fear of success. And it makes sense, right? Fear of the unknown is prevalent because the situation is unpredictable or unfamiliar to us. Fear of failure is prevalent because we are basically fearing a negative outcome. And who wants a negative outcome? What about fear of success? Well, this is usually the result of the concern that the success won't be sustainable. So when we consider fear of the unknown, some of the more common worries that we might experience would include thoughts like loss of control, or worry that we may rock the boat, or concern with feeling uncomfortable. Can you relate to any of these? With fear of failure, we may worry about making mistakes, or worry that we would be rejected, or that others might judge us. Now, I know I've heard these concerns from plenty of folks in my work as a therapist. When we consider fear of success, our concerns typically revolve around the course of events following the successful change, such as the inability to keep up, or having higher expectations placed on us, or things moving too fast, right? How many of you have avoided making changes in order to avoid any of those concerns? I know I have. In my practice, I do find that most people don't even make it to the stage of addressing any anxiety, because the first strategy usually employed is to avoid the change or avoid the scary thing altogether. Humans really are quicker to believe that they can't face the scary thing than they are to even attempt a few tactics to find out that they actually can. So I do want to equip people with the tools necessary to be able to handle fears that come up while moving through changes. So, how do we handle the fear of the unknown? Well, for one thing, let's find out, right? Ask the questions, seek out the information. I will first ask that we become more specific and identify exactly what it is you don't know. So you might say, oh, I don't know what my new hours will be at my new job. Okay, fair. How can you find out, right? Whether it be asking direct questions directly to someone, or whether it be conducting some brief research, there are ways that we can gather information in order to know more. that bringing down our anxiety around it. Okay, and then the second thing around the fear of the unknown really is be okay with not knowing everything. Right? You don't have to be the expert immediately. You wouldn't start off by reading the last page of the novel so that you know how things end, right? So there's going to be plenty of points of time within your life where you won't have access to all of the information until you see things actually unfold in real time. Okay, so really allow yourself permission to enjoy the journey just as you would, enjoy the book of that novel unfolding in front of you, right? How do we address the fear of failure? Okay, so with this, again, we're going to first get more specific. And so I'm going to ask you, what specifically are you afraid of happening? What outcome concerns you? Well, I'm afraid of missing a deadline for having a presentation ready on time. Okay, that's fair. That's valid. That's even a plausible outcome. But now let's actually instead create a plan to help you to avoid that outcome as much as possible, right? So draw up a timeline, for example, that will help you to stay on task and to stay focused while you're developing your presentation. You might speak to some coworkers who also give presentations to find out how they ensure that they're making their deadlines. What are they doing? Okay, so what are some things that you can do that's within your control in order to prevent the negative outcome that seems to be concerning you? Okay, so the first thing is what can we do about it? Secondly, when we're addressing fear of failure, is really to take a look and adopt this concept of self-trust and resilience. I talk about this a lot with my clients who are concerned with making changes because they don't want to mess up. Self-trust and resilience come into play when, despite your best efforts, maybe the negative outcome did happen. Okay, maybe you did miss that deadline. So really here, you've got to be willing to trust yourself that you can bounce back, right? Which is the definition of resilience, that you can bounce back from that situation. Trust that, yes, you will feel certain emotions as a result of that outcome. And that's okay. Emotions are normal, but that emotion will not last forever, and that you do have the ability to process through that emotion. I might feel devastated. Yes, you might, but you have the ability to process through that. And once you have, you will have gained resilience on the other side. See how those go hand in hand, right? So now with the self-trust and the resilience, what are you going to do in response to that negative outcome, right? You might need to own your mistake. You might need to have some necessary conversations with your boss about missing the deadline, make your apologies, talk about what you're going to do in the future to avoid missing deadlines again. But most importantly, you've got to stop beating yourself up, because that certainly is not going to be productive. At the end of the day, you have learned something from this outcome, and bonus points, you have evolved as a human. Okay, so making a plan to help yourself hopefully avoid that outcome, but if the outcome does happen, understand that you have the ability to come through it on the other end. Then how do we address our fear of success? Well, here we want to ensure that we're being consistent. Now here, that word is consistent, not perfect. See, because we oftentimes will psych ourselves out when we place the expectation of perfection on ourselves. And then we stop. We stop moving forward toward our goals whenever there's this possibility or this inclination that it might not remain perfect the whole time, right? Now, again, habits, which we are going to discuss here soon, will play a major role in this part with remaining consistent. Learning how to effectively implement and maintain habits is going to help a great deal. Okay. Now, also with the fear of success, we want to make sure that we're remembering that we do have support. Oh, I don't want to apply to that job because what if I can't keep up once I get it? Valid fear, but do you think you're going to be working alone? Do you think you're going to be an island at that new job? No. There really, really, truly is very little that we can do in this life alone. So don't forget, you will always have access to support no matter what pursuits you're after. Okay, so whenever you're faced with one of these three common fears when it comes to change, I want you to remember those aspects. Okay, so now, who do we look to face those scary things? Who are our protectors? Right? The knights will fight our village's dragons, or the warriors will battle our community's enemies and foes. But guess what? That's you, right? Fear of change is the dragon and you are the knight. Now really think about how true that is for you in your life, but how often we forget that truth. And I really am being truly serious here. Think about all of the situations that you have faced while feeling scared or uncertain. And you have done so plenty of times. So why wouldn't you be considered the hero or the knight in your own life, right? So here at this portion, we are going to switch gears and we're going to discuss all of the tools that we have access to help us to create the lasting changes that we want, despite feeling any fear or trepidation. All right, first we're going to go over mindfulness, which will become an integral tool like that knight's helmet in teaching us how to let go of outcomes, how to be more open to change, and how to address anxiety around it. You know, it's interesting. I wonder how much of our fear of change has actually been taught and modeled to us from others. And therefore, we go through life assuming that being afraid is the right or appropriate response to change. I find that very interesting. Another one of our tools will be goal setting. And goal setting is really key in learning where we'd like to take it from here, right? So now that you know what things you'd like to change, proper goal setting is going to help you get there. Now, most of you are familiar with standard goal setting, how and why it works, but even I appreciate a refresher course on the topic. So we are going to be going over the foundations of SMART goals. Again, that might sound familiar to you, why they work and how we can practice setting and maintaining SMART goals. Establishing support systems is going to be pretty much as important as the shoulder and chest plates of that knight's armor. So who's in your corner? What are some new and different ways that you can begin to think about support? Why should we be willing to tap into the support and resources that we have access to? And how do we go about doing that? Without support, I truly believe that we are only able to go so far. So let's be sure that we're really not selling ourselves short. Okay, here's resilience again, right? Resilience becomes as necessary as our knight's shield to help us ward off any temptations that might derail us from our goal. Resilience is what will help us to overcome any potential obstacles to realizing our goals. Okay, we're going to take a look at how inspiration, motivation, and determination become the building blocks of resilience, as each component plays a role in helping us to bounce back more effectively from our setbacks. Okay. Healthy habit formation can really actually be seen as maybe the fourth pillar to resilience. By forming healthy habits, we are fortifying our goal, which is what makes it long-lasting. Positive habit formation helps to increase stability and overall self-control. And then finally, being willing to embrace change and its discomfort will help to gain acceptance. Okay, it teaches us that we are not broken for feeling this way, and we are equipped to come out on the other side of that discomfort. So let's start with mindfulness as promised. Okay, mindfulness teaches us to remain in the present moment, focusing only on the here and now. It is a reminder to shift from the focus of what already was or from what we worry might be, therefore reducing anxiety. When it comes to change, this concept of mindfulness is very helpful, as it allows us to practice letting go of any attachments that we've had to our past and any expectations that we might have about future outcomes. Because, let's face it, what's done is already done, and we unfortunately don't have a crystal ball, as much as we'd like to, that will show us what is to come. Right? So holding on to these things really only depletes us of valuable energy that can be useful elsewhere. Okay. So here is where we're going to put into tangible practice. Okay, I'm going to give you a phrase that you can practice using all day, every day as needed, as a tool to teach you how to let go. That's the most common question I get. Jay, you're telling me to let go of outcomes. How do I do that? This is how. Repeat this phrase as often as you need to. My current circumstances are XYZ, right? So I can only address and focus on XYZ. That's it. You might want ABC. You might not like XYZ. That's all okay, because here we are learning how to change our circumstances, right? But in this very moment, my current circumstances are, so I can only address or focus on blank. Okay, so you're going to use that phrase, write it down. You're going to use that phrase as often as you need to help you let go. Okay. When we attempt to address or focus on a circumstance that isn't really truly in front of us, we will see a result of feeling like you're running yourself ragged. Okay? That's where you're going to get burnt out. So this practice here will really help you to improve your letting go skills. Okay? We can also use mindfulness to become more open to change in general. See, because as a means of survival back in primitive times, our brains did develop this defense mechanism called negative bias. This is basically the brain's tendency to skew toward thinking more about the potential negative outcomes for the purpose of protection, right? You could see how that would be a form of protection back then, or in even more dire times, right? However, we don't need this defense in all situations, or even in most. So to become more open to change, we want to practice identifying and really truly considering a viable potential positive outcome for every negative outcome that your brain wants to create. Okay, so that fear of failure that comes from what if I'm rejected can actually become a more positively skewed cognition of, well, what if you are accepted and even well liked? Okay, see, because that outcome of being well liked is just as plausible, actually, maybe even more plausible than being rejected. Okay. So shifting this type of mindset, it will take practice. So you will have to do the work to do that and to be mindful of it, but you will become much more open to change when you are able to identify outcomes that can be positive and productive. Okay, so every time you hear a potential negative outcome go through your mind, stop and think of that viable, positive reframe. And of course, we can use mindfulness and meditation as a form of mindfulness to reduce our anxiety overall in general. Things like deep breathing techniques such as box breathing, diaphragmatic breathing. You can find all kinds of videos on how to do this. Grounding techniques, yoga, like I said, meditation. These are all ways that will help us to be able to use mindfulness to reduce our overall anxiety. Okay. So, like our knight's sword, goal setting may be one of the most important weapons when it comes to facing that scary dragon that is change. If we're equipped with tangible step-by-step processes that we can apply to making a change, don't we feel more confident in doing so? Now, like I said before, I'm sure most, if not all of you, are familiar with SMART goals. But I did want to take some time here to go over this concept because I really do feel that this is a fantastic tool to use when it comes to setting and achieving goals. Okay, so our S, as we know, stands for specific. So here you want to get clear and detailed about what you're trying to change. So for example, rather than saying, I'd like to improve my health, okay, become specific about in what way you would like to improve your health. Well, I'd like to improve my health by increasing my water intake. That's more specific. Our M stands for measurable. Okay, we need to know where we are, where we're going, right? And goals should be measurable in order for us to know this. So I would like to increase my water intake from 0 glasses per day to 3 glasses per day. See, now I can count the number of glasses that I've been drinking. Our A stands for achievable. So the goal needs to be achievable and attainable by you. Okay, it would not be realistic to jump from 0 glasses of water to a full gallon of water per day. So better would be to say, I will drink 3 glasses of water to start, and my intention is to increase my water intake incrementally to half my body weight in ounces per day. And that's the standard recommended amount of water, half your body weight in ounces per day. So you'll hear me refer to that. The R is for relevant. Okay, so it's important to know and understand the reason behind your chosen goal, the reason behind why you're trying to make a certain change. So in our example here, we might be increasing water consumption as a means to reduce or even eliminate too much sugar in the diet. Okay, so eliminating sugary sodas, for example. And why is that relevant? Maybe this goal has been chosen because the doctor informed me that I'm, potentially on the route to becoming pre-diabetic. So cutting these types of sugars out is necessary. Okay, that's my reason why. And then finally, our T is for time bound. How will you know that you're done? Or how will you know that you've reached your first milestone? Okay, so now I might say that I want to reach the goal of drinking half my body weight in ounces of water per day by the end of 4 weeks. Okay, so giving myself 4 weeks to get to half my body weight. Now this way I can hold myself accountable to the choices that I make when it comes to choosing my beverage for dinner, for example. Now, next to our SMART goals here, you see that I have included action plans. Now, I kind of feel like our action plans are a close cousin or even a sibling to our goal setting process. Okay, so here we're able to form an action plan by asking, well, is there anything that should be done before I set out for this goal or before I reach for this goal? And action plans actually really work best when we work backward with them. So for example, if my goal is to run a marathon, but I don't know exactly what to do, I can work backwards to figure out my action plan. Okay, now I know that a marathon is just over 26 miles. And I also know that there is no way that I can run 26 miles right now. Okay, so we're going to work backwards by asking, well, what needs to be done before that, before I run 26 miles? Well, I need to be able to break the 26 miles down into smaller training runs. Great. Well, what do you need to do before that? Well, I need to learn the best process by which to break that down. Okay, so what do you need to do before that? I need to do some research to understand that process. So what do you need to do before that? I might need to find a book on training for the marathon. What do you need to do before that? You see what we're doing here? We are allowing this action plan to develop right before our eyes by asking that question, as redundant as it is, over and over again, so that we can see our course of action. Okay. Okay, now we have another opportunity for you to create a note for yourself. Okay, so again, you're going to see here on the slide another template, so to speak. Okay, so I'm going to ask that you're going to take a minute to, on the notes that you're taking, take a minute to write that word, those words, overall goal, on the top of your page. Okay, and a clean sheet of paper. And now, right below it, write that overall goal that you would like to work toward. Okay, so again, don't be afraid to make it something big. For this step, the size of that change doesn't really matter. Okay, so examples might include learn how to play the guitar, or move to Arizona. That's a pretty big one. Or run a marathon, to use our example. Then below this, on the left side of your page, in a column, write the SMART goals words, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. So on the left side, make a column of those words. And then fill in the spaces to the right of each of those words, the SMART words, to identify each aspect of your SMART goal. Okay, so this is where you're going to write down so that you can become more intentional with your goal, identifying the specific details of your goal, ensuring that it can be quantified and measured, making sure that it is realistic for you and that it has relevance to increase your success, and so that you can hold yourself accountable to your goal with a set time frame. Okay, so go ahead, once again, pause the video here, take your time to complete this step to fill in your SMART goals. Okay, welcome back. Now we can also practice making an action plan. And it doesn't have to be overly complicated, but I do like doing something like this because it's visual. The visual aspect helps things to be more concrete and tangible. And when you write something down, you're actually more likely to complete it. Okay, so we're going to practice doing an action plan. And in this example, we're using that run a marathon goal as our heading, as our example. Okay, and then we're able to identify 6 smaller action steps that will help us to move toward that goal. That number 6 is arbitrary. You can have as many action steps as you might need. Okay, but these action steps will answer the question, what needs to be done before that, and before that, and so on, right? So like I said before I run that 26 miles, I might need to do some research. I might need to learn how to break down my training runs into smaller increments of miles, so on and so forth, okay? So here on your screen, you see an example of how I've done those this action step. That by when space is pretty self-explanatory. By when, okay? So this is really just a jump off point. What you really want to do here is kind of repeat this process again and again, depending on how big your overall goal is, okay? So we're going to use this as a jump off point. And now you've guessed it, it is your turn to practice. Okay, so just as you practiced setting those SMART goals for an overall goal that you've identified, now you can practice getting more detailed with identifying your action plan. So use this slide as your guide for creating your own template for an action plan, and you can make your note page look like this, okay, where you would write your overall goal at the top, okay, or that change that you would like to make. Okay, and then give yourself a few blank spaces so that you can indicate, a handful of specific action steps. Okay, so one more time, this is the last time, go ahead, pause the video here, take a few minutes to complete your action plan using that question, asking yourself, what do I need to do before that? Okay, go ahead and pause. Okay, good to see you back. All right, so next, get support. Okay, a support system is crucial for success. Support in our lives helps us to navigate life's challenges and achieve our goals. Now, I consider the support system the cheerleaders in our lives, right? These are the people who are rooting you on, reminding you that you've got this and that you're not alone. Now, of course, some people, support people might include your family members, your friends, but sometimes we actually have support in less obvious places like our neighbors, community organizations, and yes, your therapist, right? Don't forget your therapist is also a form of support. So how do we access this support? Once we've identified what it is we want to do, or the changes that we want to make, we need to voice it. So reach out to others and share what you would like to accomplish and why. Allow yourself here to be vulnerable about the role others can play in achieving your goal. So you could say, it would be really supportive of you if you could fill in the blank. Now be careful, there's a key follow-up question to that. Are you willing to do so? Okay, so you're asking people, can you support me by? Now, I understand that there might be a hesitation at this point, so I do want to touch base a little bit on this part. For a lot of people, it does seem that asking for support tends to bring up that fear of rejection or even judgment. What if they say no, or what if they judge me for the fact that I'm asking for support in the first place, right? So here, I want to challenge you with a couple of questions that I'm going to encourage you to think about and contemplate on. When you're experiencing that fear of rejection or judgment, what are you assuming about the other person? Well, if I ask for support, they're going to think that I'm a burden, or they're going to think that I'm weak or incapable or lazy, right? We have all these kind of assumptions that this other person is going to think about us if we ask for support. Okay, so then turn that question around to yourself. What do you typically think about others when they ask you for support? Oh, they may be going through something right now. They might have a bit of a difficulty going on in their life. Maybe they're just really super busy at work and can't get home soon enough to feed their dog, things like that, right? Those are the typical thoughts that we have of other people. And then here's a good question too. How do you feel when you're able to provide that support? Right? Don't we typically feel pretty good? Oh, I feel so good that I was able to help my neighbor by taking their dog out, or I feel really enjoyment. I feel enjoyment when I'm able to provide help and support to others, right? It feels warm and fuzzy. Okay, so I want really for you to challenge yourself with that kind of dialogue, those questions in your head about why are the rules different for you than for other people? Why is it that when you ask for support, you're lazy, incapable, and a burden, but when others do, they're not, and you feel good helping them? So just some things to really think about with that. Next, we have resilience. Okay, as I promised you, we're talking about resilience as well as one of our tools. Now, resilience is about overcoming any potential obstacles when it comes to creating changes. And I promise there will be obstacles and setbacks when it comes to moving toward your goals and making those lasting changes. Okay, so we're here going to explore the concepts of inspiration, motivation, and determination as the main building blocks of resilience. All right, so inspiration, which brings us to motivation, which then brings us into determination. Okay, so you can think of inspiration as what gives you the idea for the goal. Motivation is what drives you to take action on that goal. And determination is what keeps you going. Okay? So inspiration is really that spark. You get the idea to make a particular change because you were likely exposed to the benefits of said idea. So for example, you may have gained the idea to replace your sugary sodas with water because you've come to realize that it can benefit you in a number of ways. And also probably simultaneously learning some of the dangers of high levels of sugar in your diet. Okay, therefore the spark is ignited. Okay. Motivation is the why. When we are setting our goals, it's important to know why. Understanding the real reason behind your desire to change in a certain way will fuel your motivation to make that change last. Why do you want to increase your water intake? Okay. Maybe your doctor, like I said before, has informed you that with all of the sugar, your numbers are showing that you're on the verge of becoming pre-diabetic, and therefore your why is to avoid that potential medical concern. Okay? Your why is to address that particular health issue, which could be pretty serious. Okay, so take the time to really identify the reasons why you're choosing a particular goal. When you feel like you're losing momentum, or if it seems like your goal, that change isn't quite panning out for you after a little while, take a pause and ask yourself why again. Maybe you've lost touch with your intentions after some time, or maybe your reasoning, your why has changed, and that's okay. But let's get back in touch, back on track so that momentum comes back. Okay? And then finally, our determination is the focus. Most people will complain that they lack discipline to make these changes stick. That word discipline becomes kind of a curse word to most, but it really doesn't have to be. We just need to make discipline work for us rather than the other way around. Now I can hear what you're saying. Jay, wait a minute. You were saying discipline here when before you were using that word determination. So what's going on? Right. Well, honestly, it's because discipline and determination are very closely related. Not exactly the same, but again, maybe some siblings here, right? Discipline is our ability to maintain control, but determination is what keeps us in pursuit of our goals, regardless of any setbacks. Okay, so our determination actually becomes threatened when we allow ourselves to become tempted in the other direction. Okay, so if your goal is to increase your health by drinking a certain number of ounces of water per day, we know your reason so that you can ward off that health issue. Okay, well, then reduce your temptations to drink those sugary sodas by removing them from your fridge and from your grocery list altogether. Determination is understanding that there might be hiccups along the way, but not allowing them to stop you from continuing forward. Okay, now there can be a number of things that will cause you to have to push pause on your goal, on creating that change. Family emergency, an injury, an illness, anything. But what's important here is that you get right back on track as soon as possible. Because the truth of the matter is that you really do have as much willpower and determination as you say you do. If you say you have plenty, you will have plenty. If you say you won't let anything stop you, chances are you really won't. Okay, you can actually get back on to your marathon training despite 2 weeks of illness, for example. You really can get back. Habit formation is one of our tools. Habit formation is the process of making our behaviors more automatic with repeated practice. Okay. Understanding how habits are formed and implementing effective techniques can help you to create and sustain healthy habits, ultimately supporting you in creating lasting changes. Charles Duhigg, in his book, The Power of Habit, describes the habit cycle as first, starting with the cue. Now, that's the trigger that brings on the initial behavior. Okay, so if I'm watching TV and I see somebody on TV biting their nails, I might begin to bite mine. Okay, the actual seeing of that person on TV was my cue. The routine is the behavior itself. Okay, so that is my actual biting of my nails. Okay, what I'm doing. And then finally, the reward, the benefit that's gained from that behavior. Okay, so in my example here, the reward is that oral fixation satisfaction that I get from biting my nails. Okay, and the infamous Sigmund Freud will tell you that that is, in fact, a reward. Okay, so cue, routine, reward. So when we want to form healthy habits, we can use this same scientific process. I'm going to make up my own words here. So if I want to get into the habit of running when previously I was not in that habit, it would really help me to identify a cue. What will that be for me? It can be anything I want it to. So for me personally, I know that in order to do an exercise, I've got to do it first thing in the morning right away to get it out of the way so that I don't talk myself out of doing it by the end of the day. Okay. So for me, my cue might be my alarm clock going off. Okay. Eventually, hearing my alarm clock go off will trigger the first thought in my mind. Oh, that means go for a run. Okay. Eventually. The first morning I hear my alarm clock go off, that might not be my first thought, but if I'm working at it, getting my shoes on and going out for my run, I will notice that that becomes my first thought. So I've decided that my cue is my alarm clock. My routine is the actual behavior, going for the run, putting the shoes on and getting out there. Okay, doing that consistently over time. And then finally, my reward is the benefits, the health benefits that I experience as a result of doing my behavior of going for my run. So I'm noticing improvements in my speed, noticing improvements in my form, noticing improvements in how I feel. I can breathe easier these days, that sort of thing. So if you want your lasting changes to really last and you're struggling to get started, start with what is my cue? And it can be anything you want it to be. Just make sure it's consistent. So why should we spend time on setting healthy, positive habits? What's in it for me? So to go over a couple here, for one, we get that dopamine hit. Maybe you've heard of that before. Dopamine is a brain chemical that helps to promote motivation and pleasure. Oh, yay, we want that, right? Dopamine is released in our brains when we've completed a task or accomplished something. So by accomplishing a goal or even a smaller action step toward your goal, you are increasing the dopamine levels in your brain. Hooray, right? And then, of course, we experience an improved mood. So the trickle down effect of that dopamine hit is, like I said, an overall improvement in our mood. Okay, not really certain what else needs to be said about that or elaborated upon that. It's just going to make you feel better. Okay. When we're setting and forming healthy habits, we notice an increase in our efficiency, right? And it actually dawns on me that I didn't even define the word habit for you, but according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a habit is an acquired mode of behavior that has become nearly or completely involuntary or automatic, right? With this comes speed and efficiency. When we first begin the practice of forming a new habit, it might feel cumbersome or even awkward until we gain our footing and get more used to that action. But once that habit is formed, it's essentially automatic and we will move through it with ease. It's like I said, hearing the alarm clock go off will eventually get me to thinking about my run automatically. And then, of course, with forming healthy habits, we get an enhanced sense of self-esteem. Okay, so performing a new positive habit will boost our self-esteem by instilling a sense of pride in knowing that you do, in fact, have the ability to make improvements and create change in your life. Doesn't that feel so empowering? Yeah, I think so. And then our final tool that our night has to hold against the fear of change is really to embrace it, right? Embrace the fact that change exists. Embrace the discomfort that comes with change. We all know that change is inevitable. It will happen. and it will bring with it discomfort. So in order to embrace that change, we can remember that we do have the ability to tolerate that discomfort. Okay, and this is called distress tolerance. Distress tolerance refers to the ability to withstand and cope with emotional distress or discomfort effectively. Okay, it involves managing even intense emotions without resorting to unhealthy or harmful behaviors. Distress tolerance is an invaluable skill to have as it supports us in responding with calmness and clarity even when things are scary. Okay, you have the ability to get through whatever emotions come up. Some emotions are absolutely normal to have. Okay? Another way to embrace change is to understand that it does take time. Okay, the time it takes to create a habit and implement lasting changes can vary widely depending on the factors such as the complexity of the behavior and even other extenuating circumstances. Right? Research suggests that it typically takes about 21 to 66 days for a behavior to become a habit, with an average being more around that 66 days for the more complex habits. But if you really think about it, today's presentation isn't just about stopping nail biting or implementing a workout routine. We're talking about creating changes, major changes in the main areas of our lives, right? So expect your efforts to take probably at least a few months or so to see some results. Okay, so go easy on yourself and don't assume that things aren't working, because they are. I promise you, you just have to give it time. All right, I do want to thank you so much for tuning in, watching this video. You stuck with me for quite a while. I know this is a bit of a long one. I sincerely hope that you have gained some really good tangible tools that you can take with you and practice in order to create lasting change in those 5 areas of your life. What's going on for you? What do you want to see different? How do we do that? Okay, here on your screen, you'll see ways to contact me. That is my direct email and phone number there. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out. And please do not hesitate to contact us at Relief if you're looking for any one of those services that I mentioned at the very beginning. You can scan this QR code and find ways to reach us. We have our email, our phone number, and the website listed there at the bottom of the screen. Once again, I thank you so much for taking your time out in your day to watch this video, and enjoy the rest of your week.